So the topic I want to deal with today is, I would say, trying to break a myth that you all grew up with that ultimately is not true. And that is the following myth. When you hear the word Sefira, what is the synonymous words that come to your mind?
The what word?
Sefira. Sefira ta'omer. For most Jews around the world, counting? That's pretty good. Most Jews around the world, when you say the word Sefira, they think of three things. No music, no haircuts, and no weddings. For some reason or another, Sefira ta'omer, the 49 days between Pesach and Shavuot, has turned into a very mournful and sad period. But it's a myth, because when you read the Torah, it seems to be a great time. On the second day of this holiday of Pesach, in the Kriyat Torah in the morning in the laning, we read about the fact that we started to count Sefira ta'omer, and we're going to count for 49 days, and at the end of those 49 days is going to be Shavuos. And all of this is in the context of what we call Parshat Hamoedot, the Parsha in Sefer Vayikra that talks about the Yomim Tovim. So Sefira, as we call it, is actually in the part of the Torah that talks about the holidays. If that's the case, how did it become such a sad period? As a matter of fact, not only is this problematic, but the Sefer HaChinuch, who again, we don't know the author, we do know that he's one of the Rishonim. He wrote an excellent book in which he writes what he believes is the 613 commandments, and on each one he writes what he believes is the reason for it. He writes, how come we didn't start counting Sefira on the first day of Pesach? Why do we wait for the second day? He says the first day is a day that's totally dedicated to leaving Egypt. And then you start counting towards the second major event, which is getting the Torah on Shavuos. So ultimately the count is to connect Pesach to Shavuos, two happy holidays, two holidays that if you're sitting Shiva prior, the holiday will eradicate your pre-existing mourning. That being the case, the question I have is a very simple one. And that is, how did it become so sad? At least in the biblical Torah, it's written within the context of being a very happy time. So what changed? So there is a yes?
For me, it changed when I found out about Lag BaOmer. And then I only have to, not cut my hair until Lag BaOmer.
So that's exactly it. So I'm going to go in order, and I'd like to go in historic order. The first thing that changed is the Sefira ta'omer itself is no longer biblical according to most Rishonim. Why? It's written in the Torah, and we count every night. How did it not become biblical? One of the Rishonim, his name was Rav Zarchia Halevi. He's called the Baal Hamaor. He lived in a place called Lunel. Luna means moon. So he called himself the Baal Hamaor because in Sefer Bereshit, the moon is called Hamaor HaKatan, the small light. And that was pretty good until he got to the tractate called Bava Kama. Then he said he needed the sun. It wasn't enough with the moon, so he called it Hamaor HaGadol, the big light, namely the sun. In any case, he's called the Baal Hamaor. And he asks a following question in Masechet Pesachim, at the end of Masechet Pesachim, in his interpretation, he says, how come when we started counting Sefira ta'omer, we didn't say Shechianu? Any mitzvah we do, if we don't do it for a whole entire year, we say Shechianu. How come we didn't do that with Sefira ta'omer? Says the Baal Hamaor, after giving a whole slew of other questions, he says at the end of the day, today Sefira ta'omer is not biblical. We don't have a Korban HaOmer. We don't have a Omer sacrifice that we should have brought on the second day of Pesach. And therefore, it's lacking. Because it's lacking, we're only doing it to remember what it used to be. But it's no longer the real McCoy. And therefore, he adds on to that at the end of the day, all we remember when we count Sefira ta'omer, I'm going to quote his words, En bo zecher l'shum hana'ah. There's nothing good that comes out of it. The only thing you remember when you count the Omer is Ogmat nafshenu v'chorban beit ma'avayenu. All you remember is how terrible things are and how we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. In other words, for some reason or another, he says, on Pesach, you can have a whole Seder. True, you don't have a Korban Pesach, but you have other things at the table. You have matzah, maror, or wine. You have a holiday. Something's lacking. On Sukkot, you have a Sukkah, you have Lulav and Etrog, you have a 8-day holiday at least. But, okay, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. When it comes to Sefira ta'omer, he feels you're lacking the real McCoy. without the Korban Omer at the beginning, and the Shtei HaLechem, the Korban we bring on Shavuos at the end, without it being sandwiched between those two sacrifices, you got nothing. All you got is a remembrance. And therefore he says, Sefira Omer, which should have been a happy period, end of the day, today is not. Why? Because we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. This will explain the following custom brought already in the Tosfot on the Gemara. The Tosfot comes along, we're talking about already 11th, 12th century, and they say that after you count the Omer, you should add something. What do we add? Yehi ratzon milfanecha Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avotenu, may it be your God, your will. Sheyibana Beit HaMikdash b'mheira arachamanu yachazir lanu et avodat Beit HaMikdash limkoma. The merciful one should bring back the Beit HaMikdash. Now we usually don't say that after we shake lulav. We don't say that after we eat matzah. Why do we say it after Sefira Omer? Probably because Sefira Omer without the Korban Omer sacrifice is basically lacking totally. Meaning you got nothing. So the first thing that changed is we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. Second change. Why was the second temple, which is the temple closest to us, why was it destroyed? Remember what you learned?
In front of me.
It's coming back to you.
No. It's the Hebrew word for it. It was the people were talking against each other.
That's right. It's what we call senseless hatred. The Gemara in Yoma says that in the second Beit HaMikdash there were very religious Jews. Very religious. They kept every last iota of the code of Jewish law. There's only one little law they didn't keep. They didn't like each other. Okay? They called each other names. Now, if you want a real illustration of what it was like, and I hate to be so political, and I'm trying not to, but in the year 2023, I felt, during the height of the judicial reform in this country, and I really don't give an opinion on it, because I have no opinion on the judicial reform. I don't understand it. I'm married to a lawyer. I don't understand it. There was senseless hatred in this country, because each group was saying, let's make two countries. Let's divide the country between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, between the religious and the non-religious. That was exactly what was happening during the second temple, but worse. They were keeping every law, but they hated each other. And ultimately, because of that sinat chinam, God destroyed the second temple. So the first temple he destroyed because we weren't so religious. We were violating the three cardinal laws of the Torah that we should never violate: idolatry, adultery, and murder. The second Beit HaMikdash, we were very religious Jews. We were very frum. The problem was we hated each other. Now we're going to add to that. Years later, not so many years later, but a few centuries later, there was a great rabbi named Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva is a very great rabbi because in the Gemara, they may go out of their way to tell you everything about him. His early life, he wasn't religious. They tell us the name of his wife. What was his wife's name? Rachel. They even tell you what jewelry he brought for his wife. Remember? The gold chain with the Yerushalayim Shel Zahav on it. That's where the words come from. Right? Naomi Shemer didn't make it up. We all know that eventually he became a great scholar at 40. We all know that many things about him. Amongst the many things, the Gemara in Yevamot says in Daf Samech Bet, Amud Bet, that he had 24,000 students, and they all died between Pesach and Shavuos. Why? Says the Gemara. Shelo nahagu kavod ze lazeh. They were yeshiva students. They were learning Torah. Not just learning Torah, but learning by one of the greatest rabbis we have. But they didn't respect each other. So the second change that happened during this period of time is that, unfortunately, not only was the temple not with us, but the reason that the temple was destroyed, senseless hatred, was practiced. And they didn't learn their lesson.
My feeling is that this war will not be over, or the hostages not return until we get together, and we're still not together.
I personally think that there's a lot of truth in what you just said. It's more sophisticated and complex, but there's a lot of truth in what you said. So indeed, putting these two together, no Beit HaMikdash, and the reason why the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, it was not because we weren't religious enough, but because we didn't respect each other. As I said at the Seder, we can be able to be 4 kids, one smart, one wicked, one very naive, one doesn't even know how to ask, but they're all at the same Seder table. And we can have a big argument, but we're all sitting at the same dining room table. That's not happening today. So you put those two things together, no temple, and the reason for no temple And you get to the minhag that the Shulchan Aruch brings, that today we don't get married between Pesach and Shavuos, or between Pesach and Lag BaOmer, or between Rosh Chodesh Iyar to right before Shavuos, whatever the minhag is, all because of the students of Rabbi Akiva did not respect each other. Now you're going to add to that, I'm just going to put in parentheses, other Jewish tragedies happen at this time also. I'm adding it because it's more of an add-on, meaning there was already an existing mourning, and they said, well, more tragedies happened, so we'll add on a little bit. The Crusades in the 11th century, 12th century, there was a few crusades, as everybody knows, happened around this time. It's spring, it's a good time to attack. As you know, the Pope called for a crusade to liberate the Holy Land from the infidels. Who were the infidels? No, it wasn't the Jews. It was the Muslims. Now they're going from Europe to Israel. On the way, they meet a lot of Jews. So they say to themselves, we have a great mitzvah. The mitzvah is to kill infidels. Why do we have to wait till we get to Israel? We got infidels right here. Not just any infidels. The one that killed our God, Jesus. And they massacred Jews in basically 3 Jewish communities at the time. That tragedy happened at this time of the year. In 1648, there was something called the Chmielnicki massacres. That also happened at this time of the year. So as time went on, there were many tragedies that happened in the spring to the Jews. But the main reason, as you go back to the primary sources, were A, no temple, and B, the reason for no temple, senseless hatred. So the question I have is, how are we going to go back to a period of time that the Ramban talks about, in which we are going to have Sefira to be happy again? Once again, we're going to count from Pesach to Shavuos. It's going to be happy. It's going to be wonderful. The Ramban says it's like a long Chol Hamoed. How long is a holiday? 7 days, right? Sukkot is 7 days. Shmini Atzeret is its own holiday. Pesach is 7 days. So he says there's a 7-day holiday, but it's not 7 days, it's 7 weeks. Between Pesach and Shavuos, we count 7 weeks, and the last day, Shavuos, is like its own holiday. Just like you have Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, 8th day, you have 7 weeks, the 8th, meaning the 50th day, is Shavuos. So, if that's the case, when are we going to go back to that? So I'd like to offer a few remedies. Remedy number 1, we have to stop hating each other. We just have to stop hating each other. The truth of the matter is, Rav Kook coined a phrase called that if the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed by sinat chinam, senseless hatred, we have to engage in ahavat chinam, in free love. I don't like that term. I don't think there's such a thing called free love. You love a Jew because he's your brother or sister.
Also, that has a
Period.
connotation to the they used to have in San Francisco. The singing and stuff like that.
Right, it also has the connotation of hippies.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, my Rebbe Rav Amital used to say that after the Shoah, you love a Jew simply because he's a Jew. And not only that, but quite frankly, we are all the children of God. The Pirkei Avot that many Jews learn between Pesach and Shavuot says that every human being was created in the image of God. Every human being. But the Jewish people are called Banim Lamakom. The Jewish people are called the children of God. Parents like when children get along with each other. So the first and foremost thing we have to do is we have to stop hating each other. We can argue. We can debate. 2 Jews, 5 opinions will not change and will never change in my opinion. But let's do it around the same dining room table. That's remedy number 1. That's pretty simple. Remedy number 2 is we have to start telling ourselves that unity is not uniformity. Namely, we don't have to be all thinking the same, but we can still be unified. How does that work? God willing, we're getting closer to the end of Pesach, and the last day of Pesach is Shabbos this year, called Shvi'i Shel Pesach, the 7th day of Pesach. What great miracle happened on the Shvi'i Shel Pesach, on the 7th day of Pesach? The parting of the Sea of Reeds, right? Well, we all thought our whole life that God made a big parting in the middle, and we walked on dry land. Then the Egyptians came in and they were drowned. The second part is true. The first part, according to our tradition, is not true. God didn't part the Sea of Reeds in one place. You know how many times it parted? In 12 different places. As a matter of fact, this is quoted by the Ibn Ezra, by the Rambam, by the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, and by the Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael. We have endless sources that say that every tribe walked through the Sea of Reeds on its own. God said to the Jewish people, as you go into the desert now, and you're going to be living together, I don't want you to all be the same. You can be 12 tribes. And each tribe could be different. How do I know that? What's my halachic proof? So God made a one-time miracle and he parted it 12 times? That's not a proof. What's my proof? I'll give you a proof. When you were part of the tribe of Reuven, and you had some sort of a quarrel with your neighbor, and you had to go to court, each tribe had their own court. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, Tractate Sanhedrin, page 16b says, Mitzvah b'shevet ladun et shifto. Every tribe has to only and solely judge its tribe. You go to your tribe's court. You don't go to another tribe's court. In other words, God likes what we used to say in that commercial. Variation is the taste of life. God doesn't like us to all be the same. If he wanted us to all be the same, he wouldn't have made 12 tribes. Would the Kohen Gadol, the Grand Kohen, wear the Urim V'Tumim with 12 stones? He'd wear one stone, one Jewish people, that's it. He wants us to be different. But we can still be united. I'll give you another proof. At the beginning of the laws of prayer, the Magen Avraham, Rav Avraham Grunbeiner, who I quoted yesterday in the Shir, comes and says that in heaven there are 12 gates to accept prayer. 12 gates. You know why? Because there's at least 12 ways to daven. There's at least 12 sitters out there. If that's the case, then why do we all need to be the same? At the end of the day, unity does not mean uniformity. In the desert, every tribe had its own flag, as you all know. And all the nations of the world, according to the Medrash, would look at them and say, how can this be? They're one nation, but they have 12 flags? Answer, yeah. You can be one IDF, different units.
We have 50 states.
You can be one country with 50 states.
Each with their own flag.
So the first thing is we need to stop engaging in hatred. And the second thing is we need to be unified, but unify does not mean we need to be uniformity of people.
Okay, I'm breaking my rule. You didn't say my name yesterday and I talked like they did.
All right, go.
That's why I'm temperamental. One thing is missing from this thing.
Yes.
My theory. I have my own theory as to why October 7th it came about. That's number one. That's me. I've talked to other people. They agree. I don't want to start a whole thing, but Hashem was fed up because we don't listen. Our leaders don't read Tanakh.
I don't.
They don't read
I don't talk for God, but okay.
Tehillim. So Hashem gave us the land. We haven't figured out how to save it. You know, this president from America says do that. The other one says don't do that. And we haven't figured, hello, just listen to me. That's number one. Unity, yes. I want to bring it into modern day times here in Israel. Okay? Difference is nice. My theory, I don't fit into any box religiously, whatever. I don't know. Ifaro says I'm on a spiritual level beyond anyone else, so she understands me. But I see some things, and I don't want to use groups, Shiloni, Dati, this, that, Haredi. But a group of people here, I believe, and it's clear, are deathly afraid that another group is going to rule the entire country and tell them, which in some places, you know, you can't go visit your family on Shabbat if you don't have a car. If you're driving through a certain neighborhood and it's not blocked off, you get the stones with Shabbos. That's their fear. How do we undo that on both sides? This
I want to answer your question.
Yeah, this bashing. Notice I'm not saying the word.
I want to answer your question.
Of each other.
The bashing of each other has absolutely no justification, and I'll tell you why. Because you see, I'm a religious Jew. I believe that's the way to go, and I'd be happy to make my point to anyone. But there's freedom of choice out there. I didn't give it to the Jewish people. The state of Israel didn't give it to the Jewish people. God did. If you look in the book of Devarim, again and again, God says, I'm giving you two ways the bracha and the klala, the blessing and the curse. Ubacharta b'chayim, and you should choose life. It's not up to me to tell a Jew how to act. It's up to me to inspire and influence, and they have to make their own choice. I think the Jews that believe that this is the way to go, have to do everything to make it accessible to them. But once it's accessible, it's up to them how much they take of it. And in a word, it's like you have to give them breakfast. So you put the food in front of them. What they decide to put on their plate is up to them. And if we don't internalize that message, we're in trouble. Because if the more and more we force, the less and less Jews will become part of the Jewish people. And I think that has to be fundamentally what we say to each other every morning. My job is to influence and inspire and access. My job is not to force. What you're talking about is exactly the price of force and coercion. And in this country of Israel, I'm diverting from the topic, but it happens to be my full-time job. I work for Tzohar, so therefore this is what I deal with every day. I believe that coercion in this country has only brought damage and no good. And let me give you a proof to what I say. Is there any law in this country that says you have to give a circumcision to your male children? No. How many people circumcise their male children in this country? Every survey shows over 80%. Is there any law in this country that says you have to fast on Yom Kippur? No. How many do? Again, over 80%. But once you make a law that says that when you go into hospitals, I'm allowed to check your backpack for crumbs on Pesach, then there's a counterattack. And then people make picnics outside of hospitals with pizza on the night of the Seder just to give it to you. And I can go on and on with examples.
Bad on both sides.
When they wanted to make a law that, thank God they didn't, that if you come to the kotel immodestly dressed, you'll get 2 years in jail. For the first time ever, when Jews, without a law, understood that when you come to the kotel, when you come to the Wailing Wall, you come in solemnity, you come dressed modestly, a woman showed up in a bikini just to give it to them. So, I hate to say this, but coercion led us nowhere. And all we have to do is go back to the basics. God said to the Jewish people in the book of Devarim, before they entered the land of Israel, hey, there's freedom of choice. You make a choice, you have to live with your choice. God's not going to clap his hands and say, hey, you decided to murder, no problem. No, you make a choice, you're going to pay for it. But there's freedom of choice. Our job is to access, influence, and inspire. That's all.
So what do we?
I can understand your thing for Jews, but I go one step further, and it's for all humanity, whether they're Christian, whether they're Muslim.
You're right.
And the reason I say this is that I worked with a gal who was a Zoroastrian, and all it was goodness. That was their whole.
I agree, and I happen to think it's the right way to go in general.
I have a Catholic daughter-in-law who is much more, how can I say religious? I don't mean by she doesn't go to church or anything like that, but in her respect for others.
Let's remember that even non-Jews call it the Old Testament, meaning it's part of their testament.
And I can tell a beautiful story, but I'll tell it to you later.
So how do you solve the problem? Like the people who don't have money to have a car, and it's an old lady, and it's Shabbos, and she wants to go from this city to that, and then the government votes, you can't go.
I'll tell you, there's many solutions to public transportation on Shabbos in Israel, and I'm just going to throw out two of them: automatic cars, non-Jews, and I can think of many others. The problem is not the solutions. The problem is the willingness. And in my humble opinion, there's a group of people that we like to call politicians that will get into Knesset as long as they continue to keep us fighting. Yeah. But if there's a willingness to make solutions, there's solutions out there. And I'm not scared of them. And I don't think that many of the non-religious Jews that I meet are scared of those solutions either. They acknowledge this is a Jewish country. They acknowledge what a Sabbath is. And they want solutions. And we can work on them. And how do I know I'm right? Because we somehow made solutions for hotels to be open on Shabbos and still kosher. We somehow made solutions for hospitals to be open on Shabbos and still be Shomer Shabbos. So the country can't continue that way? I think it can. And quite frankly, all we need is willingness. And I think that this is the period of time. We have to think about it. We have to constantly remember, Sefira should have been happy. And it's not because of our own actions. So it's very easy to say, Crusades, Chmielnicki massacres. That's not the reason. That was added on. The reason was because of our behavior. And now we get to the third remedy, and that is, we have to start looking at the physical world and saying, it's also kosher. You mentioned before, I can get a haircut on Lag BaOmer. What happened on Lag BaOmer? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai came out of the cave, and we all know the story. Well, it all goes back to a Gemara in Masechet Shabbos, Daf Lamed Gimel, Amud Bet 33b. They were looking at all the great things that the Roman government built in this country. They built bathhouses and roads and whatnot, really industry. And there were basically three different responses of the rabbis to what they saw. Some loved it. Some said, hey, all of this is narishkeit, because it was built by Goyim.
Avodah Zarah.
And I don't know if they said Avodah Zarah, but at the end of the day, they said narishkeit. And some, were quiet. The one who said it was all narishkeit was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So, ultimately, the Roman government heard about this. They didn't keep it quiet. They gave drushes and shul about what they're seeing. So the guy that called Rabbi Yehuda, who said everything was great, he went ahead and they said, we're going to give him great royalty. The one that was quiet, they said, we're going to make him move homes. He lives in one place, we're going to make him move up north to Tzipori. But Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who said this is all narishkeit, we're going to kill him. So what did he do? Him and his son ran away to that famous cave, and they sat in there for 12 years. You all know the story. And eventually they came out. And when they came out, they saw something extraordinary. They saw a Jew holding two hadassim. And he asked the Jew, it's Friday, you're running home with two hadassim, it's not Sukkot. Why are you holding two myrtle branches? With due respect, what does that have to do with Shabbos? And he says, I'm bringing it home in honor of Shabbos. One for Zachor, one for Shamor. Namely, one symbolizing the positive commandments of Shabbat, such as making Kiddush, and one the negative commandments of Shabbat, like not putting on the lights. And ultimately, after seeing that, when he heard the words that he can take a myrtle branch of Hadassim and turn it into something for Shabbos, that somehow made him okay. Yativ Date, says the Gemara, he all of a sudden said, I make my peace with what I say. Because the Jewish people had the ability to take the physical and make it spiritual. Well, I'll say it differently. They took an object and they sanctified it. We have a state of Israel that's far from perfect. But do we have achievements? And our job is to take them and to sanctify them. And if we don't, then we're going to continue complaining. Oh, what are you going to do? The government doesn't totally keep halacha. Oh, what are you going to do? There's name calling. We can continue to call a name. We have to take what we got and sanctify it. And we have a lot that we can do to sanctify it. I'll just give you one little illustration. Today is the Yortzeit of Rav Soloveitchik. I'm sure you heard the name before. They asked Rav Soloveitchik something about the flag. In America, it's very, very acceptable that in synagogues, next to the ark, there's two flags. The American flag on one side and the Israeli flag on the other. And they asked Rav Soloveitchik about flags. And he gave an interesting answer about the Israeli flag. He said, in his humble opinion, the Israeli flag has sanctity to it. Why? He wasn't a mystic Jew. He said, when a person, lo aleinu, is killed, you don't do a recht, you don't do a tahara, you don't purify its body. Because there's so much blood on his body, you have to bury him with his blood. So what you do is you just cover him up with shrouds above whatever he's wearing, and you bury them. He said the Israeli flag, so many Jews died for. It's like saturated in blood. And therefore it has holiness to it. Now, you can take it and say, I don't like what he said. You could take it and say, I love what he just said. The bottom line is, what Rav Soloveitchik did was he took a very simple object that we all take for granted. An Israeli flag, we'll put it up before Yom HaAtzmaut on our porches, right? We'll have our barbecue and we'll take it down. And he made it into something sanctified. Now, again, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai had to go into a cave for 12 years because he couldn't do that. We can't make that same mistake. So if Lag BaOmer is the day that he came out, If Lag BaOmer is the day that this Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai finally understood, hey, even the physical, the bridges, the bathhouses, can be sanctified. You can use the bathhouses to get clean for Shabbos. You can use the bridges to get the places quicker to do more mitzvot. Then I think that part of the remedy of making these days happy is to stop looking at what we see in front of us and just saying, it's just trees and tennis courts and gates. No! This is the state of Israel being rebuilt. This is the land of Israel that for years was barren. As soon as Jewish hands came and started to touch it, it started to flourish again. I mean, you all read Mark Twain's description of the land when he was here in the 1800s. Nothing. All of a sudden, 1881, Jews started to trickle back into Israel. The land began to flourish. It's like the land was waiting for a Jewish hand to take a shovel and to turn the earth. So I think that this third thing we need to do beyond unity, and beyond saying that unity doesn't mean uniformity, is to start taking what we have and sanctifying it, bringing it up a notch, bringing it up a level. And that would be continuing in the tradition of how this period of time as Sefira became happy. Now, for many generations, the only happy day we had was Lag BaOmer. So from Pesach to Shavuot, Pesach ends, Shavuot comes, all that period of time, we had one day that was happy, Lag BaOmer. Thank God. We have 2 more days. Yom HaAtzmaut before, and Yom Yerushalayim after. And I personally believe they are very happy days. I believe you could take haircuts. I believe they, on the day itself, is a very happy day, because Yom HaAtzmaut is the day in which we took the physical, namely the land of Israel, and we made it a spiritual entity. Just to give one halachic ramification of Yom HaAtzmaut. Forget about the barbecues a second, and the fireworks and everything else that comes with Yom HaAtzmaut. Let's just talk about one little thing on Yom HaAtzmaut that changed halachically that day. There is a law in the Code of Jewish Law that when you go by a Jewish community that used to be in Israel and is no longer, you have to rip your shirt. Terrible. There used to be a Jewish community, I don't know, in Beit Lechem, or in this and that place, and no longer, you have to rip your shirt. When do you stop ripping your shirt? So if you would have asked me, I'd say, when there's Jews living there. No, that's not the law. You know when? When it goes under Jewish sovereignty. So imagine we took a law in the Shulchan Aruch. We can take our Code of Jewish Law at home and basically take a red marker and go, or hopefully forever, because it's under Jewish sovereignty today. So it used to be a Jewish community, and then it wasn't, and now it's on Jewish sovereignty. There isn't one Jew living there, say, but it's under our sovereignty. That law changed on Yom HaAtzmaut. We took the physical, we uplifted it. What happened on Yom Yerushalayim? First of all, physically we were saved from clear and current danger. 6-day war. I don't have to tell you what the waiting period was about. But forget about that a second. We got back the most amazing thing. We got back the city of Jerusalem, and in it, the old city, and in it, the Kotel and the Har HaBayit. Forget about what we did with those gifts. I'm not so sure we treated them properly. But quite frankly, we got back amazing gifts. And finally, the Jewish people had a shrine that they can go to and say, this is our holy spot. It wasn't Stam that Sanchanim, these tough paratroopers on the 6-day war that captured the old city, were crying at the Kotel like babies. Growing up in kibbutzim and never having a kippah on their head, never going to shul, the Jewish soul was reunited, rekindled by that day. So we're getting back these days slowly but surely. Very slowly but surely. But we have to be aware that it's not a gift that we just get and say we can move on. We have to keep it nurtured. A, we have to stop engaging in senseless hatred. B, we have to say unity is not uniformity. And C, we have to look at this physical land and say, it's beautiful. Let's make it better. And if we do those things, in my opinion, many more days will come back to the Jewish people. And I'll just end with the following beautiful vort that was already said at the Tish after the first night of Pesach. The second night of Pesach, we had a Tish in this room. Someone else said it, but it's a beautiful vort. You know that in the Jewish calendar, all you need to know is the first day of Pesach, and you know the rest of the calendar. All you have to do is take the first letter and the last letter, then the second letter and the second to last letter, and you know the Jewish calendar. So the first day of Pesach was on Sunday this year. Aleph, the last letter is Taf, meaning Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av will be on Sunday. Next, Bet, second day of Pesach was on Monday. Bet equals Shin Shavuos. Shavuos this year will be on Monday. Third letter of the alphabet is Gimel. Third day of Pesach this year was on Tuesday. Guess what's going to be on Tuesday? Third to last is Reish, Rosh Hashanah. Onwards. The Code of Jewish Law conks out in the 16th century at Vav. That's as far as he got. Vav equals Pei, Purim of last year. That's where he conks out. Now let's continue one more. Zion equals Zion. You ready for this? Yeah, every year, the 7th day of Pesach is Hey Iyar, 5th of Iyar, Yom Ha'atzmaut. I don't believe in coincidences. That can't be a coincidence. Every year, that calendar, that for generations, conked out at Vav, we're the generation that could see it go on one more letter. Zion equals Zion. But we have to know how to keep it. Just like any present we get, if we don't guard it, it can very easily get lost, and God forbid, forever. We have to guard the state, we have to guard each other, and we have to ensure that we'll be able to live with each other. And if we do, I think that just like the Sefira period now has 3 happy days versus none, we're going to get back many, many more days until, as the Ramban says, it will be a true Chol Hamoed between Pesach and Shavuos. Thank you very much.